Hello. Lee Pierce, hello. Here with my first vlog number 1. So, I've seen these YouTube videos, you must have seen them, where people are, talking in their car, and I always thought it was really strange unless the point of your vlog is about driving. But I started to think about it, and I was like, for so many of us, we spend tons of time in our car. And the car's actually not a bad place. It's super quiet. You can keep the AC on so that you're not sweating on your video. It obviously comes with some major delivery drawbacks, which we'll talk about later. But what I wanted to focus on in my short vlog for today was just this idea of car driving as sort of a mode of presentation. And also, I wanted to use the time not only to talk about just the mode of presentation, but also to talk about a concept, and since that's kind of the assignment, and I don't have to talk about concepts in the same way that you do, because you have obviously like a specific list of ideas from a unit that you want to explore, and I kind of can explore really anything I want. And so I'm actually going to talk today about the grading policy for the class, which includes submission deadlines, because the way that I work, late work and deadlines, is a little bit different than other people. So I'm actually going to talk about 2 concepts. The first one is a delivery concept, which is this car thing, and the second one is the syllabus concept. And so I'm kind of doing essentially 2 vlogs in one. You should really just focus on one concept. All right, so part 1 is going to be the car mode presentation. So the car mode presentation violates a fundamental rule of rhetorical theory that was probably best stated by Kenneth Burke, who was a mid-century rhetorical theorist. And Kenneth Burke had this term, consubstantiality. And what Kenneth Burke essentially meant was that you and the audience need to be sort of co-substantial, right? You need to feel like you share identity in common. And he didn't mean like you both have to like football. He meant that you had to feel like you were interdependent on one another as humans. And this is kind of, I don't know, it's like a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, it feels relatable because I'm sort of like letting you into this part of my life you don't normally see, which is me in the car. So in that sense, it kind of has a benefit. But on the other hand, I'm literally talking down to you. I mean, physically talking down to you. And I'm not looking at you, right? I'm doing something else. So it almost feels like I didn't have time to invest in this actual relationship, so I'm just expecting you to deal with it. And so I find the car thing interesting because I definitely think it's a double-edged sword if we think about Kenneth Burke's theory of consubstantiality. The other issue is with the car mode of presentation, and this comes from Jody Dean, who is a cultural theorist. Dean has this concept of celebrity culture, right? This idea that we're constantly pressured to produce media, that our identity is so bound up in how well and how often we circulate content. And to me, the car presentation, unless you're doing it for a reason, like, I don't know, suppose you just had a really interesting experience at the doctor's office and you're still crying or whatever, and you just got in your car, and so you want to give that sense of like, here's my immediate feeling right off the experience, raw and uncut. That then would make sense as sort of something to do in the car. That's a strategic move. But in terms of just thinking, oh, well, I have to produce content today, I don't have any time, well, I'll just do it in my car, that can be dangerous, because doing it not only kind of suggests that you're never allowed to have your own mean time, but as Dean suggests, it also contributes to this celebrity culture idea where everyone's always supposed to be producing. And so you're feeding into that system in a lot of ways. And you can think about what that does for people who say don't have access to the technology. All right, so that's sort of my part 1, which is about this mode of presentation in the car. The second thing I want to talk about while I've got your attention, again, I'm cheating here because I'm doing 2 concepts, I really should just do 1, is I wanted to take a minute to talk about my grading policy. So my grading policy is pretty simple, if you really think about it. I have deadlines, but they're not dead in the sense that the work isn't dead after the line. Douglas Adams, who is the author of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, he's a fiction writer, has this hilarious statement where he says, I love deadlines, I love the sound that they make when they go whooshing by. So Douglas there is using personification as a play on words to say he loves deadlines, not because he can meet the deadlines, but because he likes the sound that they make. So I always thought that was funny. And that's kind of how I feel about deadlines. I rarely make deadlines. And I think for most people, they work last minute. And so for me, what a deadline is for this class is it's a good time to submit the work, because if you're submitting work by that time all along the semester, you're never going to get too far behind. However, that's not really how things work, where you've got like the one deadline and then no one's ever going to accept the work. So I also have with these things called early submission incentives. So if you're a certain amount of time and your work is submitted before the deadline, it's, I think, more than 12 hours. If your work is submitted more than 12 hours before the deadline, you get a 5% early submission bonus. If your work is submitted within 12 hours of the deadline up to 12 hours after the deadline, I consider that on time, right? So if it's 12 hours early or 12 hours late, I consider that an on-time submission, meaning that during the semester, most students who are submitting work on time are submitting it somewhere in that window. For being on time, you get a 2% bonus. And this seems weird, right? Why would you give somebody a bonus for being on time? It's like, well, because people are late a lot and being on time is important. So you get credit for being on time. Anything more than 12 hours after the deadline is just the grade you get, right? So I'll accept work up until pretty much the final day of classes. And if you want to submit everything that you've ever done all at once, then I guess that's your choice. It's not going to work out well for you. So I definitely do not advise taking advantage of the late policy. But if, the shit hits the fan once a semester, which it does, you can take the time that you need to submit the work. And obviously, if I start to notice this as a habit, I'm going to get in touch because I'm going to be really worried. So just be aware that this is not a freebie. There are consequences to submitting late work. They just don't have to do with your quote-unquote grade. So that's all I have to say about the assignment policy. You can learn more about that in the syllabus if you'd like. And I am now at almost 7 minutes, so 2 minutes too long. I apologize for that. You stick to your 5-minute deadline, and I will see you for vlog number 2.